open to this notes page where we're going to discuss how does a genotype become a phenotype. That might be a confusing question if you're thinking to yourself, what is a genotype? Well, a genotype is the genetic makeup of an organism. So maybe in your earlier biology classes, you have seen something like a Punnett square. A Punnett square involves an organism's genotype, or the genes that make them up. A phenotype, on the other hand, is your traits. So maybe you have dimples, maybe you don't, maybe you have black hair, maybe you have blonde hair, maybe you have brown eyes, maybe you have blue eyes. Phenotypes are those specific traits. Here's a great illustration that shows genotypes versus phenotypes. Genotypes, like we said, are an organism's genetic information, and that genetic information determines what we look like or our observable physical traits. And we can see that here in these photos with these flowers. So you need to know that genes determine our traits. So as a reminder, in step 1, we have learned about DNA and our genes. We've also learned about phenotypes and what we look like. And now we're going to talk more about how this occurs. So as a reminder, which organelle in your cell contains your genetic information? Try to write it down before I tell you. Hopefully you said nucleus. Now let's look at the next question. The next question asks us, what are our chromosomes made of? And the DNA segments are called what? Take a second to write down what you think the answers are before we move on. Hopefully you said chromosomes are made of DNA and that your DNA contains special segments called genes, as you can see illustrated in this image above. DNA is an example of what macromolecule? And what is the monomer of DNA? Hopefully you wrote down or at least thought about what these are, and you thought that these are nucleic acids, which is the macromolecule of DNA, and the monomer of nucleic acids or DNA is called nucleotides. What is the function of DNA in an organism? Hopefully immediately you knew that the function of DNA is to store genetic information. Now I want you to think, what are you primarily made of? What macromolecule is the primary macromolecule in your body? Hopefully you said proteins. And genes are instructions for our body to produce, and hopefully you remember this from our unit about protein synthesis, but it is instructions for our body to produce proteins. And so we're going to talk in this unit about these steps 1, 2, and 3, and remember that middle step is called protein synthesis. And now we're going to talk about our genetics and about how all of these things link together from our DNA through protein synthesis to our phenotypes, genotype, protein synthesis, phenotype, to make us who we are.